Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about choices, marginal cost, and marginal benefit. Now, before we do any of that, do any of you have any questions as far as what scarcity and opportunity costs do? Are we good there? I know those are simple terms, but we have to know. Is everybody good there? All right. Now, when it comes to marginal cost and marginal benefit, have any of you ever heard of that before? All right. Well, what's a benefit? Is that good or bad? If you get a benefit from something, most of the time it's a good thing, right? Cost, nobody likes to pay for things. Sometimes it's a bad thing, right? Unless it's something you really want. So what we're going to do with this is basically define what marginal cost and marginal benefit are, okay? And then as far as that, we'll go from there, and then we'll finish up the handouts that you guys got. So there's a few questions that we're going to need to answer. First thing I would do, and I didn't put this on this slide, but this is SOL 1A and B, okay? Or excuse me, 1B, 1C, not 1A, 1B, 1B, 1C. 1B deals with choices, and 1C deals with marginal cost and marginal benefit. So if you want to jot that down in your notes, you can do that, okay? And that will put, once we get through this little section, that'll put us halfway through the first SOL that we're dealing with, okay? So let's start with SOLB, for example. SOLB states that we got to explain choices and how they have unintended consequences. Now, you guys know as well as I do, sometimes when we make a decision, things happen that we did not intend for them to happen. You guys understand that? It happens in business. It happens when we go buy things. It happens all the time. All right? So the first little note that I would make underneath SOL 1B is that I would put down what is an unintended consequence. You have to know what an unintended consequence is, which I'm fairly sure you guys already do, but we're just going to make sure that you do. Okay? So what is an unintended consequence? All right, so let's go ahead and talk about unintended consequences. Okay, let me find it here. All right, so underneath where you put down unintended consequences, this is what we're talking about, where it says essential understanding. It says choices made by individuals, firms, or government officials often have long-term consequences that can partially or entirely offset the initial effects of their decision. So let me use an example, and you guys can make this understand. Let's say that the state of Virginia is used to getting $10 million from the federal government to fix roads on an annual basis. You guys understand that? So every year, federal government sends Virginia $10 million, and we're going to fix all these roads, with all these potholes, all this stuff. Okay? Well, let's say that, take the coronavirus, for example. Obviously, there's not been a lot of people working, so money is very hard to come by nowadays, right? People are just now starting to get back to work. So instead of the federal government giving the state of Virginia $10 million, let's say they cut their budget a lot, so they only give you $3 or $4 million for roads. You with me? And they only give us like $10 or $15 million for education. Well, if 10 or 15 million is more than enough for education, then we could take some of that money and put it into fixing the roads, right? If the state of Virginia needed to. But an unintended consequence of that may be, well, since the state of Virginia done that, Carroll County may not be able to update their Chromebooks because they didn't get enough funding. You guys understand what I'm saying? It's all we were trying to do was fix the road, so we took a little bit of this money and moved it over here. But since we've done that, something else suffers. Does that make sense? So beside of unintended consequence, put down that it's a long-term consequence. It starts right here. I don't know if I can highlight that. Long-term consequence that can partially or entirely offset the initial decision. Okay? So, an unintended consequence is when a consequence that can partially or entirely offset the initial decision. Let's put it in a business term. Let's say that Walmart comes out with a new type of laundry detergent that they say is the best thing ever. You guys got me? Well, they make a ton of it, and then when they try to sell it, they only sell maybe 15 or 20% of what they make. That's not good, right? They had an idea that they would sell a bunch of it, but the unintended consequence was that they cost their business a lot of money making this that nobody bought. Okay? So a choice can have unintended consequences. You guys do it all the time, I bet. How many of you made a decision and made one of your friends mad before, and you didn't even mean to make them mad because of the decision you made? You do it all the time, right? You may decide to go hang out with somebody else, and one of your other buddies gets mad. Well, an unintended consequence of that was your other buddy got mad. All right? So, that's pretty simple. And then it says few choices are all or nothing decisions. Most choices involve doing a little more or a little less of something, and that's just part of it. Most choices you make always have an effect. There's usually not an all or nothing idea. Okay? So, an unintended consequence is one that can partially or entirely offset the initial decision. Is everybody with me there? Does that make sense? Okay. The next question we got to answer, it says, what is marginal benefit? So below that, write down marginal benefit. Marginal benefit. Now, before we get too in-depth about marginal benefit and marginal cost, the SOL, this is 1C. It says that decision making requires comparing additional cost and additional benefit. So basically, we've got to figure out just another definition of what marginal benefit and marginal cost do. Okay? So, as far as your notes are concerned, by definition, it says that marginal benefit is the change in total benefit resulting from an action. So that's what we need to write down as the definition, and that's the important part. Is that it's the change in total benefit resulting from an action. Now that don't make a lot of sense. It's very vague. The change in total benefit resulting from an action. So, look at it like this. If I am a consumer and I am willing to pay, I don't know, $5 for an ice cream cone, if I am willing to do that, then the marginal benefit of me consuming that ice cream is $5. Does that make sense? So, underneath where you put this definition, you're going to have to listen to what I'm saying next, because I didn't put it in your notes. But put down that marginal benefit is the maximum amount. It is the maximum amount that a consumer is willing to pay. It's the maximum amount of what a consumer is willing to pay. And who are consumers? Us, people like you and I. Go back to something you guys like. I know my stepson loves video games. It costs him $60 every time he goes and buys a new video game. And we use this a little bit during the scarcity examples too, because when the new video game comes out, everybody wants it, right? So the demand for that is really high. So the price of it is really high. So what businesses have figured out is they can charge people around $60 per video game, and that's when they sell the most of them at the peak demand. You guys understand that? That's the maximum we're willing to pay for it. So if businesses started making video games $70 instead of $60, what's going to happen to the demand of it? It's going to shrink a little bit. Businesses aren't going to be able to sell as many. You guys understand that? And there's a whole formula that they go through figuring out marginal benefit and marginal cost. But as far as our concerns are, we're just worried about what they mean. So marginal benefit is the change in total benefit resulting from an action, and that it's the maximum amount of what a consumer is willing to pay. Because eventually, what are we going to say to a product if we really, really want it, but if the price is too high, what are we going to do? We're just going to make a choice and decide on something else, correct? So, benefit is the maximum we are about to pay. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does that part make sense as far as marginal benefit? The maximum amount of what we are willing to pay. Okay? All right. The next one. If I can get my mouse to work here. All right, let's go with marginal cost. Just dot it down right beside of it or under it. Sorry. All right. So, if a benefit is the maximum amount that what consumer is willing to pay, marginal cost put down that it is the change in total cost resulting from an action. It is the change in total cost resulting from an action. Now again, that is vague. Now marginal cost usually deals with businesses more so than it does consumers. Okay? So, an example of marginal cost. If you look at the bottom of this slide, it says that if a company needs to build a new factory in order to produce more goods, the cost of building the factory is a marginal cost, meaning it's going to cost them more money to make more products, but in hopes of doing what? Selling more of it and making more money. You guys understand what I'm getting at there? So a great example of this is like a Dollar General. They build Dollar Generals everywhere, don't they? Well, the company, Dollar General, has to fit the bill for building all of those buildings. You guys understand that? But at the end of the day, they are thinking that it's worth their risk to build all these buildings because are people going to buy their products? Yeah, and normally it happens. Okay? So, it's a change in total cost resulting from an action. Okay? Also with this, and I did not add in your notes, jot this down, that marginal cost includes all cost, that vary with production. And I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. So, let's say that it costs me okay, let me think. Let me put this in an example that you guys will understand. All right, let's take like a Snickers bar. How much do you think it costs to make one Snickers bar? If you had to guess. They usually sell them for what? $2 maybe? So do you think it takes that company $2 to make one? No, it probably costs them like 50 or 60 cents, right? So if they make that bar for 50 or 60 cents, and say they're selling them in a case, a 24 case, for $12. So say it just costs 50 cents a pop. 24 in a case, $12 total, right? Marginal cost is what it would cost if they make one more Snickers bar. You guys understand that? So instead of making 12, they make 13. How much more money are they going to have to put into that, and how much would they have to charge? You guys understand what I'm saying there? You guys with me on that? All right. So that's what marginal cost and marginal benefit do. Okay? And then lastly, put down a little bit about decision making. I don't think that's... Oh, this is when it comes to us, when it's decision making for benefits and costs. It says to determine the best level of consumption. Do you guys know what the word consumption means?
Consuming.
Yeah, consuming is the use of something. Okay? We use things every day. Consumption doesn't just mean like eating food. Like you are consuming the notebook paper you're writing on right now. You are consuming the pencil you are using. You're literally using it. So, to determine the best level of consumption of a product or whether to participate in an activity, people must compare the additional benefit with the additional cost of consuming a little more or a little less. So what that is saying is from a consumer standpoint, is it worth our time to spend a little bit of extra money in order to get something else? Or is it going to cost us if we do that? You guys understand that? So as a consumer, we have to make a decision on if we want a little bit more or a little bit less. It all comes back to decision making. You guys understand that? So I would jot down from here, put down that we have to make, where's it at? People must compare additional benefits with additional cost of consuming. Is it worth it? That's what we're getting at. Is it worth it? People must compare benefits and costs when making a decision. All right?